Hello, and thanks for joining us for Workday Now for Financial Management, just one in a series of short recordings covering each of Workday's main product areas. My name's Greg Upham, and I'll be your host for today's demonstration. As we get started today, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about the challenges we hear people in accounting and finance groups talking about all the time. And for context, let's keep in mind the number one tool that gets used is software. And to go one step further, since the turn of the century, we've seen an explosion in software development and the amount of data that can be gathered. But in many ways, the technology hasn't kept the pace when it comes to business applications. And the result for people in finance and accounting is a lot of manual effort when it comes to managing all of the transaction flows. So whether that's batching and posting or moving data between systems, and the systems themselves don't work well together. Each requires its own upkeep. So if you have to make a change in one, you're likely to have to chase that change across multiple systems. And there's a real cost to all this, especially when it comes time to upgrade, where you're likely to spend a lot of time and a lot of money on a project that typically doesn't yield that much business value. In short, for people in accounting and finance, technology is the business problem. The complexity of most systems means you've probably got a lot of really smart and well trained employees who spend the majority of their time constructing basic financial statements and not nearly as much time providing the analysis and insight that can really benefit the broader business. This is the problem that Workday set out to solve. So how do we do that? First, all the transactions and the reports in Workday are in one place. So this means you don't have to move data to update reports, but also our reports go well beyond typical financial statements to end up looking much more like a BI tool. Second, if there's one thing Sarbanes-Oxley taught us, it's that accounting isn't just about the debits and the credits, it's about how you got there, which is why Workday was not only has always on audit, but it's also a system built on process. And this native part of our technology allows you to configure transaction flows that meet your needs directly in the same system. And when you can do those two things and really clear away a lot of the manual effort and the associated noise that comes from a complex system environment, you enable engagement across the entire organization. Everybody's on the same user-friendly system using the same set of numbers, so people from all disciplines can really focus on the issues. Last, Workday was designed for change. Most companies today strive to be nimble, and you need a system that can keep up. Workday requires only simple configuration by business users, not complex custom code written by somebody in IT. So we're going to see examples of all of these today. So with that, let's jump into the demo. As we log onto the system, something to note, Workday uses role-based security. Everybody will have a unique username and password, but access will be automatically limited to what's relevant to that individual user's responsibility. So I'm going to log on now as our corporate controller so we can get a wide view of the system. And for those of you who haven't seen it before, this is Workday, and you'll notice it has a very consumer internet-like look and feel. The icons in the center here represent the areas in the system that this user goes to all the time to do their work. Um, but these aren't static. These are all configurable by each individual, and access is governed by that security model. Additionally, every user will have this personal menu up here. The personal profile is their HR record. Everybody will also have access to an inbox where they'll get things like alerts to tasks that they have to complete. You'll also see me navigate quite a bit today by search. So really nice search functionality here in Workday as well. Um, Workday is a complete accounting solution. So, let's switch gears and focus on that. And we can start with one of the most fundamental types of transactions, a journal entry. And we have one saved here midstream that we can take a look at. And keeping in mind that in Workday, transactions and reports are never separate, I want to spend a couple minutes talking about our information model. Workday's information model is unique because not only do we support all of the traditional dimensions provided by most accounting code blocks, but our approach also allows for the inclusion of much more detail on every transaction than most other general ledgers and accounting systems do. And this is important because it's this detail applied at the transactional level that supports the rich real-time reporting downstream that we're going to see in a second. So we have some basic information in our header up here. You can also include attachments on these journal entries, but it's down here at the line item level where I think the information model is best illustrated. So this is a simple accrual entry for property and casualty insurance. We have our company, we have our ledger account, we have our debit and credit amount here. But as we move to the right, we can also see we have currency information. We also have cost center information. And here at the end, we see a section called additional work tags. And for our purposes today, you might think of these like dimensions in a BI tool. And so what we have here, this is our accrual line. And so if you think about it, having supplier information around something you accrue might be helpful. Geographic information like region, spend category is going to drive our P&L reporting along with our cost center. But the point is a lot of information that you can use to enrich this or any other transaction within Workday. You can come in, there's any number of different dimensions that we could select from. So channel, customer, division, line of business, location. Maybe you want to tie this to a project. But Workday gives you the ability to add all of that information in, even into something like a general journal entry that typically wouldn't have very much information around it. Behind the scenes, it's also easy to control the level of detail required on each transaction through a series of robust validation rules. For example, if we were to try and delete out cost center from our transaction and submit that, what we would see is that the system is going to give us an error. Cost center is required for anything that hits our P&L, and so the system is going to enforce that rule. You can have different rules for different transaction types. You can even have different rules for different GL accounts. So we need to add this back, but being able to control this behind the scenes means you can really limit posting errors at the time the transaction is entered. So you make sure the information gets into your GL right the first time. And this limits the amount of reclass and reconciliation that most of our customers have to do at the end of the month. Something else I want to point out about this journal entry, and you may have noticed this before, we're hitting two different ledgers here. Workday supports global organizations. And so in this case, we have an entry that we want to split out between our US and our Canadian entity. And so we just have these three line items on our entry, but I want to show you what happens when we submit this now. A couple things to point out. First, whenever you see this green check mark in Workday, it means the process is complete. There's no batching and posting. Instead, we rely on these plain language business processes, which we're going to see in a second. And this green check mark tells us that this is now complete. Something else, if we scroll down here, we can see that the system has done some work for us as well. So we have two different entities in play on this particular transaction, and we can see that without entering any information on our line item from our entry around intercompany receivables and intercompany payables, the system has automatically generated those components of this entry for us, giving us a balanced entry on two different sets of books. So both our US and Canadian books have an entry now that is fully balanced. And if we look a little bit closer here, we can also see that there's some currency information going on here. Functional currency is different between US and Canada. So we're also capturing the information necessary to translate this entry along with all of that information that we included to enrich this transaction. And so we're going to see now how you can leverage all of this information put in at the transactional level in reporting. So let's take a look at an example of that. And again, keeping in mind that the transactions and the reports are never separate, I want to look at a financially oriented dashboard here. Um, And so this is one of dozens of dashboards that Workday delivers out of the box. It's got a handful of the hundreds of reports that we also deliver. These reports you can use them as is, or you can configure them to suit your needs. All these reports are also drillable, so you can get into any of these numbers to find out more detail. We also have set up here a reporting binder. And if you think about how much time you might spend loading and building your month-end reports in Workday, you don't have to do that. Those once the month is closed, those reports are automatically updated. In fact, if we come in here and we look at it, let's look at a trial balance. So one of the other values of Workday is if you think back to that journal entry that we just created, just submitted, maybe you want to see the impact of that journal entry right away. So we can come in here and run a consolidated trial balance that lets us, and here we're gonna run this for North America, so it lets us capture both of those ledgers that entry impacted, and we're gonna run this report in US dollars. And so if we come in here, right, pretty traditional trial balance. You can see we have our ledger accounts running down here on the left. We have companies here across the top, but we have something else here as well. We have our eliminations have been included in this trial balance because what we've done is automatically consolidate and automatically translate all of the transactional activity so we can take a look at this report in a common currency in real time. And if we scroll down to our intercompany account, come to our intercompany receivables account here, maybe we wanted to look at this by journal source. So you can drill into even a trial balance here, and we can see here's our accrual entry from that journal entry that we just submitted. And we can get a quick snapshot of this journal entry so we can see here our journal 7668 has come through without batching, without posting, and we're actually seeing all of this information in a consolidated view. So if we came over here, we could click into our eliminations and see the system will create all of your eliminating entries necessary to consolidate. So again, here's that same journal entry that we just submitted. So real-time currency translation as well, real-time consolidations, real-time eliminations, real-time transactional activity, and a trial balance that's much more like an analytical tool than a traditional trial balance. For example, if we came up, we could drill into our cash account by journal source as well. And if we do this, what we get is almost a quick and dirty statement of cash flows. We can see all the ins, we can see all the outs. But in addition, we can add some detail to this. Maybe we wanted to add bank account information. And so now we can see how all of this information impacted each one of our bank accounts. And another thing, every other system that I've ever used has required a separate GL account for each one of my cash accounts. Another value of the Workday system is you don't have to do that. So we can get all of the detail necessary to track and reconcile each one of your cash accounts without necessarily creating a really detailed and uh, complicated chart of accounts. We can see here we have just a single cash account, but we're able to get all of that same information that you typically would when you set up individual accounts. So again, this helps limit the number of accounts where there's activity, helps limit mispostings, helps reduce the amount of time spent reconciling at month end. In addition, we could come back and maybe we wanted to run this report in a different currency. We could run this in Canadian dollars as well. And so just like that, we can run this report in a completely different currency. So retranslating all of that currency, re-eliminating, reconsolidating, all in real time. So you can begin to see that Workday has this really unique combination of efficiency and effectiveness where you can enrich all of your transactional activity, allowing for all of this really rich detail and include that in a general ledger that doesn't strip out that detail like most other general ledgers do, and bring this all the way through because you have your transactions and your reports in the same place, and in real time be able to see the impact of any transaction all the way through consolidated financial statements. And again, all of this is live fire. We're seeing this in real time as the system actually operates. A major factor to making all this work is the information model that enables enrichment beyond the capabilities of most traditional ERPs. And if you think about it, that's because most ERPs have the chart of accounts at its center. But this centuries old system wasn't designed to handle everything that we expect from it today. From a pure accounting standpoint, all you need for an entry is an account, a debit and a credit. All GLs have a code block, but the code block is really an attempt to merge the managerial accounting needs inside the framework of the chart of accounts. And the code block is often stretched to its limitations. For example, a facilities group might be interested in something completely different than, people in sales and marketing. And this information might live somewhere, but it probably gets stripped away when it hits your general ledger. So this was another problem that Workday set out to solve. How do you keep all the beneficial aspects of financial accounting and at the same time satisfy all of the other reporting needs that the business has? And we did it using these things we call work tags, and we saw an example on our journal entry. But what they allow you to do is enrich all your transactions with the right information that can be leveraged in reporting and at the same time not be subject to the limits of traditional ERPs. In Workday, for example, if we think about facilities and sales and marketing from a transactional standpoint, they're both going to want the same basic information. So company, account, those things that you probably have in your code block are also going to be included. But if you think about, people in the facilities group, they're probably interested in things like locations and projects versus the guys in sales and marketing who are interested in, campaigns and products. So Workday allows you to include all of this information on each of your transactions. And because the transactions and reports are never separate, all this information can be leveraged in real time. And we're going to continue to see examples of this throughout our demo today, but something else that's important to understand is how process impacts Workday. As we talked about earlier, Workday is a system that's fundamentally driven by process, and this makes sense when you think about how important process is to most businesses. So I want to point out some of the advantages to having this as a native part of Workday. And so if we come back into the product as our financial executive, we can see some really great examples of the business process if we come to her inbox. Here we can see a number of different tasks waiting for her. And these tasks are related to a variety of business processes from across all of Workday. And whenever a user has a task to complete, they're sent a notification here to their inbox. That notification also can be forwarded to an external email. These tasks can be financially oriented, such as, a period close task, or say a spend authorization, or more HR related, like this time off request she has from a direct report here. But let's focus on this supplier invoice that she has here. And we're looking at this supplier invoice because it exceeds a certain dollar amount. So it requires that second level of approval. And we're going to follow this transaction through the system. So if we just take note of some of the particulars, it's invoice 13427, and it's being sold to our Canadian business unit from BMS Market Research. And the invoice is for 22,500 Canadian dollars. And if we scroll down here, we can see that the spend is for market research. And we can also see over here, as we saw before, a section for some additional dimensions around this transaction. So if this looks good for the sake of the demo, we're just going to go ahead and approve this. And if we do, again, we get this green check mark telling us that the process is complete. And if we come down here, we can see the details around this transaction as well, like we saw with our journal entry. But what we can also see, what I want to focus on now, is the detail around the process. So we're going to look at how these processes work in more detail in a minute. But what we can see on this transaction is a breakdown of not only all the steps this invoice went through before it was complete, but all of the individuals responsible as well. And this is the value, of having not only all of your transactions and your reports in one spot, but your people as well. All in a single system that gives you complete visibility because it's a system built on process. By the way, another thing that did happen automatically here is Workday automatically generated the accounting entry. So without batching, without posting, not only can we see the debits and the credits, we can see all of this additional dimensionality included as well. So not only do we enable simpler charts, but because we're augmenting the information this way, we're producing more granularity in our reporting without any extra effort. Once the process is complete, the transaction's available for reporting. So let's take a look at what I mean. So you don't have to batch and post to move transactions from a subledger to a ledger in Workday. We really rely on these plain language business processes that you can define to match your company's needs. And once you see that green check mark, like we saw with that transaction, it's available to be reported on. So to see that, let's run a P&L. So again, this is just a standard financial report. So our P&L, we have time periods running across the top here. We have accounts both at a summary and a detailed level running down the left. In addition, all of these fields are drillable. So if we come in here to our sales and marketing line and drill by business document, here's that invoice that we just approved. So without batching, without posting, it's available in real time. And also, just want to point out, different dollar amount on the invoice than we're seeing on our P&L here, and that's because we ran the report in US dollars, but the invoice is in Canadian dollars. So real-time currency translation, real-time consolidation as well. But in addition to using the accounting information to generate standard financial reports like this, you can also use all of those additional dimensions we saw on the accounting entry to drill by. So, maybe we want to come in and look at this more closely by company. We could drill into Canada to get some more detail, perhaps by spend category. And if you remember, we saw that on that transaction line. But the value of having all this rich information included at the transactional level means, Workday supports deep horizontal and vertical drill paths. For example, we could drill into market research by supplier. And if you think about it, we're getting all this off of a P&L. Typically, most companies don't have supplier coded on their chart, so they can't get to this level of detail. Workday removes that limitation. In addition, we can get right down to the actual supplier record. So we can see here a snapshot of the financial activity that's current with the company or with the supplier here. And you could also take action right off this as well. So, you may want to put a note in the account. Maybe you wanted to create a contract. So you could do that here as well. But as nice as all this is, and every business has a strong need for financial statements, but the reality is most managers inside your business have different requirements. So, in order to engage them with the information that they need, you need to be able to take this and present it in different ways. Take, for example, executives. The overall performance of the business is important to them, but oftentimes they're interested in a completely different presentation and they're never at their desk. So I want to take a couple of minutes and show you how you can engage different groups within the business. And I want to show you a dashboard on the iPad. So I've logged on here as our CEO. And so for Workday, it's a single mobile application, which makes it really easy to deploy. The look and the feel is very similar to the desktop, so it's easy to drive adoption. But the real advantage here is when everything is in one place with reports that are automatically loaded means you can really focus on building a set of reports beyond the financial statements that really service the broader business. So I'm going to come in here. This is a financial results dashboard. And it's really designed specifically to engage a group of senior executives. So, we're taking all this information and we're synthesizing it up to a higher level here. We have all this different information around profitability, around cash flow, around booking. So, we're bringing in information from a different system as well. You can include comments, and you might tie to related reports here. All of these are drillable. So really nice dashboard. And again, this is just one of dozens of dashboards that Workday delivers, hundreds of pre-configured reports that you can use to really give people the information in the way that they really want to see it, the way that they understand it. So it gives you the ability to use all of that accounting information, but deliver it in a meaningful way out to all of the people in your business. But what happens when things change? Businesses are dynamic, and given the critical nature of back office systems, it's important that they keep up the pace. But historically, that's been a challenge for ERP systems. Whether it's a version upgrade or a new instance, traditional ERPs have not been easy to change. So that's why from its inception, Workday has recognized how important it is for your systems to match the business's needs and to be able to keep up the pace of change. So let's spend our last few minutes talking about that. In most accounting systems, the amount of detail you can get out of them is limited to the code block. To compound the problem, if something changes in the business and you need to change one of those segments, you'd likely need to do a reimplementation or something similar. Because of Workday's approach, we don't have these limitations. Not only can you have all of the reporting dimensions your business needs, we've made it easy to make changes when necessary. So what we're going to do now is add a new reporting dimension, and then we're going to immediately use that new dimension in a transaction. Then we're going to see the impact of that transaction and that new dimension on a report. So quickly, let's go back into the software here. Okay, so it's just going to be a simple two-step process to do this. So Workday gives you the ability, a lot of the work tags you see in the system are going to be from other things that are in the system, like suppliers and customers. But in this case, maybe you want to start tracking your revenue and expenses by your activity across certain, certain industry segments where you weren't doing that before. So we're going to add industry as our new segment. Again, Workday is a global platform, so you could enable this across the entire system. We're just going to enable this for financial transactions now. And the only thing we have left to do to enact this is to give this some values. So maybe historically we focused on professional services, and so we're going to want that. But maybe you're also now starting to track your activities in the high tech industry. So let's include that as well. So you could bring in a much longer list here, but now we have a category and we have some values that we can use in that category for any transaction. All right, so one additional step, maybe you want to control how these are used throughout your organization. Workday gives you the ability to really slice and dice across all of your different transaction types when it comes to how you want to use these dimensions. But in this case, let's pick on expense reports. And what we can see here is that industry is already available here on the bottom of the list. But maybe we want to make this its own field, so it's not sitting buried somewhere in a list. We can go ahead and move this out and into the top. So this is we're impacting the reporting when it comes to expense reports. So let's go ahead and put industry back in. So now industry is going to appear in the header line on our expense reports. And if we want, we can check this box and make industry a required field on all of our expense reports. So that's the only area that we're impacting now. The work tag is available throughout the system, but it's only going to be required on expense reports. And so we can see an example of that. And so I've logged on to our mobile device here as Noah Pierce, our controller. And what we're going to do quickly here is just enter an expense report. And if we do, we can see that industry is now a required field. And this, remember, is a dimension that we just created. And so maybe we pick high tech. We can add an expense. Maybe we'll grab one that's already existing. We can go ahead and submit this for approval. And so now if we come back and we approve this invoice, maybe we'll go to a different dashboard here, one that's a little bit more focused on um, direct management activities. But if we come in here, we can search in our travel and entertainment section by industry, and we can see here's that transaction that we just processed on the mobile device. All right, already. So not only did we just create this new dimension, but we already use it on a transaction, and we can see the impact of that transaction on a report using that new dimension right away. And so if you think about how difficult it might be to do in your system today, you can appreciate the benefit of being able to make these types of changes when necessary in a system like Workday. And so with that, we're up against our time. And so hopefully during the course of our demonstration today, you've seen the benefits of a modern platform. The advantages of having all of your transactions and your reporting in one place, the unprecedented control that our business process gives you over those transactions, as well as being a platform that's designed to engage all levels of the business, as well as track and manage all of the change. Um, I'd also like to briefly remind you that this is just one in a series of short overviews covering each of our main product areas, including human capital management and technology that we have available. And with that, I would just say thank you and have a great workday.